go. Yep. Yep, because we still got a couple of peeps, a couple of your classmates that are still doing the at-home version of this class. So we make sure to get those recorded. And actually, those students we'll have to find a time for them to do the civics exam. You all get that taken care of on Thursday of this week. So that'll be really good. Okay? All right. You guys ready? Let's get to it. So, recapping this particular situation, the cross on Table Rock, is it constitutional or not? Well, you know what? It is an interesting thing. Come on, this thing is working. Give me a break. I just had it. There we go. Okay? The thing that we use, the Supreme Court gave us, is this Lemon test. We're going to be looking at this as we go through. Some of you guys may recall how the analysis went with respect to the Table Rock cross. Is putting a cross on Table Rock have a secular purpose? Chris, what would you say? Putting a cross on Table Rock, public land, when it was put up in the 1950s, is that a secular purpose?
From what I remember, the meaning secular, I would say no.
Yeah, secular means what? Not religious. And a cross typically is going to be seen as a religious thing. So that one probably, if you look back on it, the Lemon test was come up with the Supreme Court in the 1970s. Of course, the big case was the Shemp case having to do with public prayer or prayer in a public school. And that was in the early 60s. So it's kind of looking back on that. And yet there was still a sense. So let's see how many of you guys can recall. Why, tell Mr. Hanson, raise your hand, is the cross up on Table Rock? Okay, good point. It is private property now. Who sold it to the private owners of that property? The government. Let me ask you, Yvonne. Was that sale of the private property? Did that sale violate the Lemon test? Is the sale of a little piece of property right underneath a cross? No, they didn't sell the cross. The cross belonged to the private owners, the JCs, private group, civic group in the community. The land was owned by the public, so they put it up for sale. By just putting up a little teeny tiny parcel of land, did that seem like it might violate the Lemon test? No. Does it have a clear secular purpose to sell a piece of land underneath a cross? Maybe. You could use it for other stuff. All right, Ivan, let's go to the second one. Does the sale of just that little teeny tiny piece of land and everything else around it is still public, does that seem to advance a particular religious point of view? Yeah, that might be where it kind of mucks up a little bit. So this was the takeaway, because I wanted you guys to have this written down in your notes and so forth. Because as you go through all this, it's like really interesting stuff. It's like legal. You look like you figured it out. You're like, I don't think that's going to pass the Lemon test. And the sale of land seems like that's not going to pass the Lemon test either. So raise your hand, you can tell me, why is the cross still there? What do you mean it's too late? Is it too late ever to do something in the court system? Yes, it is. You can write that down. Yes, it is. There's a thing called a statute of limitations. If it's something really serious, then you might have no limit. For example, if a murder is committed, you got a dead body, and you're like, well, who did it? I don't know. 30 years. Evidence comes up 30 years after the murder. Evidence comes up, and the police are like, oh my gosh, we've got really good, solid evidence. We can bring charges against this person. Well, you're wondering, is the statute of limitations, is there only so much time to bring that charge? On murder cases? No. And they've actually expanded that to like some really serious felony cases like rape, child molestation, things like that. Okay? You writing all that down? How about if you're speeding? The police officer pulls you over and just like says, well, I'm going to think about giving you a ticket or not. I mean, like, that's not going to happen. You either like get a ticket or you get a warning. But let's just say they were like, oh, I'm just going to think about it and I'll get back to you. Anybody know what is the statute of limitations on a speeding offense? How long does the state have under Idaho law to either bring a charge against you or not? You're like, a week? I want to say it's about a year. That's fairly short. Yeah, that's fairly short. And a lot of these, like civil cases, it's about a year, not much longer. So that's the point in the Table Rock. People who said, oh my gosh, that is a violation of the Constitution. That selling off that parcel of land that seemed to favor, one buyer over the other, and forget about that. When should they have brought their case? Yeah, within, I want to say a year or two. I'm not exactly sure. But when the discussion was going on, because I remember this discussion was going on about 5-10 years ago or so forth, people were like, I don't think we're going to get anywhere because we're too late. You got to do your paperwork, you got to bring your lawsuit within a certain amount of time, otherwise it's too late. That's a general fairness principle. You don't want to have something hanging over you for a long, 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 long time, unless it's a murder charge. In which case we're like, oh yeah, we can bring murder charges. So for example, relative to what I'm teaching the juniors right now in the Holocaust, if you got a Nazi war criminal and they were like responsible for the death of Jews and other people during World War II, is their statute of limitations run out? No. This is like, there's still, occasionally you'll find, there's like, oh my gosh, there's like some Nazi, prison guard who's in his 90s who now they're taking to, I don't know about Guantanamo, but it's like, some of those things, it's very, very important to get the folks. All right? Okay, you ready for the next ones? I've got a whole series of them. Get you all practiced on this one. Okay, we got the Table Rock one. All right, here we go. I need some help from you guys. Christmas cases, write this down. There's a variety of different Christmas cases. It's typically the Christmassy ones. I suppose in some communities that had a larger population of people that had faith other than the majoritarian Christian, which is a large perspective in many parts of the country. But let's say, you were in, Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan, where there's a lot of Muslims living or so forth, or are you in a community where there's a lot of Jews living and so forth? Can you put up, here's an easy one, can you put up religious visual stuff on your own private yard? Of course you can. Yeah, that's easy, right? So if you see, oh my gosh, there is a nativity scene on a church property. Duh. Yeah, really? Really? Okay, really? All right, so a nativity scene. Just for getting the facts out there, volunteer, show your hand if you want to explain. What is a nativity scene? Go for it. I'd say so. Yeah, okay. So is it a big, fancy building structure? So what kinds of things would you typically might see in a nativity scene? Go for it.
Mary, Joseph, shepherds.
Shepherds? They were invited?
Not the shepherds, the kings.
The kings? The kings were invited?
And then there's usually a cow or a lamb.
Oh, a cow? A lamb?
It's in a stable.
A stable? It's like, why didn't they stay in an Airbnb or something like that? What's the problem? And what were they doing in Bethlehem anyway? That wasn't even their hometown. All right, so just by way of background, okay, you have this rendition. You've got a stable. You have animals because there was no room in the inn, because there were a lot of people there because they were doing a census. Oh, by the way, we just finished the census for 2020. Did you guys hear that? It's in the news. We just finished the census. Apparently, over the last 10 years, our country's population has grown the smallest percentage compared to, the Great Depression. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Although, what is the second fastest growing state in the country? Idaho. What's the first? Utah is. Yeah, Utah is. Utah. So, yeah. He was watching the news. There you go. So, back in the day, in Roman-controlled is what is now Israel or Palestine, whatever you want to call it, the Roman Caesar was like, I want to know how much to tax people, so I'm going to count them. And let's see, how do the Jews count their people? They count them by their families, and they're 12 different tribes. And so, yeah, you have to be counted in your tribe. So if that means you have to move from where you are, so yeah, if you happen to be from like the family of one of the 12, which is David, you had to go to Bethlehem. So that's what Joseph and his pregnant wife, Mary, were doing in Bethlehem. And there were so many people there, they didn't have a room. And so, and the stable, and so you got animals and so forth. And as the story is told, then you got shepherds showing up going, and then you got like wise men or kings and so forth there. So a typical setting, you would have those religious figures from within Christianity. Got that? So, here's an easy one. Are you ready? If the majority within a community said to their local government, or maybe to the state government, if it's a state building, state property, we want you to put up a nativity scene on state property. How many of you guys would say that is not a violation of the Lemon Test? How many guys would say that is a violation of the Lemon Test? Ben, does that have a secular purpose to put up Jesus and the nativity scene on public land? Does that have a secular purpose, or would you say religious purpose? I know, that's why you have, it's tough because there is a word that sounds like secular, that is religious, and it's like sectarian. Sectarian would be religious. Okay, so what is it? It's not secular. Okay, so it's religious. All right, so here we go. Those are easy ones. So you're not going to have that. All right, let me change it up a little bit. Okay? In fact, let me get a little bit of inspiration from, actually this one works. Anne Frank, Human Rights Memorial. Even though there is scripture from religion in the memorial, Max, how is this okay? History, and it focuses on human rights. Is that a particular religious thing that is only found in religion? No. And in fact, that's the point of that. They point out religious examples, they point out literary examples, they point out political examples, they point out all kinds of stuff. Okay? Now, when we had the 10 Commandments in the courthouses, how is it that, at least in one courthouse, it ended up being okay? Victoria. The history of law. Okay, so here we go. Let's say that somebody, oh my gosh, this stupid clicker. It keeps busting. I don't know how to fix it. No. A little teeny tiny. Yeah. There we go. Here's the question. Write this down. How can you turn a Christmas display into something that would not violate, still messing up. Need another clicker. Oh my gosh. Here, let me fix it. A height-deprived person? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Okay. This is going to be a little bit of an issue for me here because I don't think it's really quite fixed. Okay. How about this? Let's say that the community is deciding, all right, this is the time of year. In fact, be very serious about this because, write this down. I'm going to give you the answer right away. Some cities have been able to have Christmas displays in public areas. Okay? Understand that? If it's private property, you can do whatever you want with private property. Businesses can set up, stores can set up all kinds of displays to Why would stores set up displays around Christmas time? Write this down. Christmas is a huge season with respect to the sale of merchandise. It's a make or break time. Okay? Because a lot of people, whether they're practicing Christians or not, purchase lots and lots of stuff around Christmas. A lot of time is, when you guys are like in school or in college and so forth, there's a lot of time off around that particular time. There's a lot of focus on, put it down, spending money for gifts. And so stores want to tap into that seasonal expression of spending money for gifts. That is also associated with the Christmas time season. Now, are there gifts contained within the Christmas story? Probably the one that jumps to mind is like, the three wise men, the three kings coming to give gifts, right? Right? Or although Christianity would say Jesus is a gift to all people. But as far as stuff, the three wise men and so forth. How about this? Would this work? Wow, I haven't even got started yet. So they're like, okay, what if we make it not about like advocating religion, Christianity in this case, and make it about like getting people excited about spending money? Is that okay? Spending money, is that a secular purpose? Ben, is that a secular purpose? Yes, non-religious purpose, okay. Does it seem if you put a whole bunch of like, what do you need to do to make that sort of spending money and excitement about holiday and Santa? Where does Santa fit into the Christmas story? Yeah, Santa is a saint. If you go back to like, way back in the early days and so forth, he is a Christian symbol. Although, can you have a modern Santa without having it necessarily directly tied to Christianity? Sure. What about Rudolph? Sure. What about the Grinch? Sure. What about Frosty? Sure. Am I missing anyone? Well, I already said Rudolph.
What about the fire and ice cube?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's from the Hanna-Barbera story and so forth. If this, take a look here, because this is the way they've gotten around it. If this is the display on public land, I think that's actually somebody's house. Do you have neighbors like that? Oh my gosh. Yeah. You are that neighbor. Okay. Those are always the fun one to visit. If this is the display, raise your hand if you think this would pass the lemon test. Because you do have some religious symbols there, but do you see some things that are not religious symbols? Like Max. Yeah, there we go. I think that's Max. And Nutcracker. There we go, the Nutcracker. And Christmas trees. This would be where put this down. These cases, these Christmas cases, if you throw enough seasonal stuff in there, you throw enough sort of like purposes beyond just, focusing on Jesus and focusing on money and celebration and buying stuff and so forth, the courts have said, okay. That's where sometimes then the Christians come and go, can we remove the nativity scene from your gaudy display of lights and everything? Besides that, every once in a while some yahoo keeps switching out Jesus with, Frosty's head or something, or Yoda. I'm like, what the heck? So there you go. The Christmas display cases. Questions about this? Okay? All right. Yeah, go for it.
So if people started to worship like the Nutcracker,
Shh.
say somebody started to worship the Nutcracker as his only true savior that will one day back the world in the second coming, first coming.
This is a good question. Listen to that. There's no such thing as, maybe, a bad question as far as these things. Because somebody comes up, and I'm going to be coming up with this thing. Well, what if somebody does this? Well, what if somebody comes up with it? In fact, I'm just about to. What if somebody takes what is previously an innocuous thing, right, and all of a sudden turns it into a religion? Can you practically turn anything into a religion? Yes. Because all it takes for the inception of a religion is for somebody, is that it? according to you? You need 3? What if 3 agree and then 2 of them offshoot and then you got a splinter of 3 different religions? How are the courts going to deal with it? This is going to be one of the focuses as we move forward here. Are you ready? The courts are looking, write this down, the courts are looking at this religious and government thing, and they're trying to find, like, grounds for seriousness. So, for example, if somebody facetiously brought in a case that said that, I don't know, let's say that the government put a symbol of Frosty in front of a government building. Is Frosty a religious symbol? I don't think so. Would Frosty violate the Amendment Clause? No, I don't think so. If somebody came in and said, but I worship Frosty, one person, is that going to be enough for the court to say, oh, this is a religious thing? And you do? Okay, I'm sorry. He came back to life. Yeah, he did. Well, there you go. Anyway, it's going to be very interesting. Yeah. Trust me, when we get to the prison cases and we talk about individuals' right to practice their religion, it's going to be very interesting. All right, here we go. The next focus is going to turn primarily to free exercise of religion. Write this down. You have a right to freely exercise your religion. Fair enough. But the government also has all kinds of rules and regulations that apply to all kinds of things. And sometimes, arguably, those rules inhibit people's practice of their religion. You understand? Not just thinking about it. Thinking about it is no big deal. You can think about whatever you want. But as far as exercising, carrying out your religion, that's when it gets problematic. All right, let's get to the particular case here. Drug use. Illegal drug use. Write it down. Illegal drug use. Specifically, this, it's like a cactus-y kind of thing that you can find in the southwest United States. It's called peyote. Okay? P-E-Y-O-T-E. Peyote. And it is a highly hallucinogenic compound that comes from natural things. It's a plant. Okay? Now, here is where it gets interesting. Okay? You've got all kinds of various different rules as far as, like, you can't use peyote. And that applies to everybody. But, here we go. You ready? Save a little time on this one. Actually, we'll take a volunteer if anyone seems to know. Who uses peyote as part of a long-standing religious historical practice? Do you know? Native Americans? Some Native Americans, because we got lots of different Native American groups and so forth. I always have to double check on this one, but I want to say at least 1 or 2 of the Native American tribes in the southwestern part of the United States. I want to say Navajo, although I'm not 100% sure on that one. Okay? Anyway, in the southwest part of the United States, write that down. There are Native American tribes that have used peyote and want to continue using peyote without government interference. Do you understand that? So they're saying they should have a right, their right for religious free exercise of their religion is greater than the government's interest in tamping down on illegal drug use and the side effects from all that. Do you understand that? How's that going to play out? Well, it's very interesting. Here we go. It's very interesting as far as the particulars. First thing we need to do, and this is where you're going to immediately see a hole in this. The government wants to know, the courts, I should say, want to know, is this a valid, real religious reason? First, is it based in history? Is this actually going on? Do you understand that? Now, of course, there's an immediate flaw there. What's the immediate flaw? Whose religious belief should be held to greater protection? One that's been around for a long time or one that just started yesterday? That's where the courts seem to be giving more credibility to something that's been around for a long time, because otherwise you get somebody walking in the room and go, I'm inspired yesterday, and we need that drug in my religion as of yesterday. I'm not trying to get a loophole, Your Honor. Do you understand that? So, can the Native American tribes in the southwest part of the United States, can they historically show that they've been using peyote for religious purposes? Yes. Okay? And they're going to get the exemption. Sorry, I'm not going to have you discuss it. We'll just go straight to it. Write it down. The courts are going to give the exemption to those Native American tribes, not any Native American tribes, but the ones that have historically used it. Now, this is where things get very interesting, because then you have to look at it and go, well, how was it used for the purposes? You have to look through there and you're like, I mean, somebody might come up, a chemist might come up and go, yeah, you smoke enough of that, you're going to see some really interesting spiritual things. And they would attribute it to like drug hallucinations and chemical effects on the brain and yada, yada, yada. Within the context of the Native American tribal structure, that is tapping into a spiritual realm. And the chemist is going, that's your spiritual realm? Right, okay. Nevertheless, within the Native American practice, the use of peyote is used to tap into a spiritual realm. Now, here's an interesting question. Who in the Native American religious practice is using the peyote? Just everybody, like when they're sitting around, like before and after dinner? No. It's part of a ritual. Is there some person, as opposed to everybody, who's going to be using that particular substance? Yeah, they're like the shaman. Yeah, some of you guys are like, yeah, a shaman could, and then they would go into the spiritual realm. The chemist would go, yeah, you're on a drug trip. And then they would report back things and observations and messages that they had picked up during their journey into that realm. Do you understand that? That's very important you know that, because if somebody comes in, another like Native American comes in and goes, well, I want to use it, whenever. Like after lunch, I just feel like having a little bit of peyote. Do I have the exemption? No, not necessarily. Now here's something, hang on just a sec. Here's something that's very interesting. Maybe somebody, has no connection and association with that Native American tribe. They're like, hey, that's a religion I want to join. Okay? I'm going to join that religion. I'm going to join that tribe. And I'm going to have my own little shaman thing, like, I don't know, every afternoon. I'll be my own little personal shaman and stuff. Is that going to work? Is that how it works?
No.
Question, can you join a Native American tribe? No. Native American tribes, they're not like, some religions are proselytizing religion. Raise your hand if you know what proselytizing means. Yes?
It means that they preach and try to convert. Exactly,
try to convert others. So they may send out. Do you guys know of any religions that send out people to other areas? Is Christianity a proselytizing religion? Hello? Yes. Is Islam? Yes. Is Judaism? Not so much. Historically, not so much. It can happen, but comparatively, not so much. Are Native American religions proselytizing religions? No. Okay? You are born into that Native American tribe, and so that's how you join, in a sense. I suppose you can kind of marry in or so forth, but do you see the kind of the limitations? And the limitations are created kind of like in a historical concept. All right, question.
So I want to be able to join the tribe, but I can't just join the religion to add myself because I don't have a shaman. I have to add myself.
Here's the thing, and you can write this down, because skeptical judges are going to look at somebody that just shows up and goes, hey, I was inspired by that. I'm not going to try and join because then they won't really have me. But you know what? They've tapped into something, and that's my religion, Your Honor. Right? That is my religion.
That's why I have to do heroin.
And trust me, you will have plenty of people, a lot of prisoners, that are advocating for their free exercise of religious rights. And the judges are going to go, and so there's going to be a lot of push and back and forth on these ones. And this is a fascinating thing, because which religion should have more rights? People following which religion should have more rights? Ones that were founded 1,000 to 2,000 years ago? How about if you were founded, say, within the last, 160, 170, 180 years? Should they have rights? What about yesterday? You're like, the practical matter is, here's the deal. The practical matter is, the more people you have in it, and the longer it is, that's going to help you. Does that make sense? The courts are being very practical. All right, let's go through some more scenarios relative to this, okay? All right, here we go. This is kind of like where things are happening now. And it's very, very interesting and very controversial, okay? There's a lot of laws that have been created in various different communities, and we'll get into a lot of the discrimination stuff that's coming up in the equal protection. But, I mean, you're familiar with discrimination that's been going on at various different times. Last year in the 9th grade, the last unit we were able to do was the Civil War. And sadly, even after the Civil War was over and African Americans were free, there was all kinds of discrimination against African Americans, and it stayed in place for many, many years. We're going to come back to that a little bit more. But it's a very interesting thing here. So, I mean, even going back to the New Jersey Boy Scouts case. New Jersey wanted to tell the Boy Scouts how to run their association, right? And who could be a member of their association. Did the Supreme Court say New Jersey was going to get their way? No. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the right to association of the Boy Scouts so they could set their rules. This is where things get very interesting. There's a lot of play, and there's a lot of interesting cases that are popping up here. People practicing their religious creative choices overlap into the, come on. They overlap into the area of, my camera still on? Yes, good. Okay, that's fine. They overlap into the area of commerce. So, for example, if you wanted to, let's say you've got a community, okay? Just for sake of argument, let's say, I don't know, Seattle or San Francisco or Portland. A community where you would be more likely to have laws in place saying if you're open for business to the public, you may not discriminate. Okay, does that make sense? So here's an easy one. If you're open for, like, as a restaurant, can you discriminate and not allow African Americans to come into the restaurant? No, of course not. Okay? Hold on.
Not that they should, but don't they have the right to refuse?
How much do they have the right to refuse somebody who's loud and obnoxious and bothering all the other people in the restaurant? Yes. Do they have the right to refuse somebody who's like hasn't bathed for 5 years? Yes. Do they have the right to refuse somebody if they're like, you know, coughing and hacking along all over the place? Yes. Do they have the right to refuse on the basis of your hair color? I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, why not? If it's something unchangeable and so forth. So here's the deal. In some of these communities, write this down. Hold on. In some of the communities, then, they're having non-discriminatory practices with respect to gender identification and sexual orientation. Do you understand? So that kind of package of things. Oh my gosh, you keep dropping things. Will you? Hey, this is like third time he's dropping things. You okay? There we go. Shh. Okay. So, for example, if you are this is where it gets complicated. If you are you have a property and you rent it out for events, okay? Can you discriminate on the kinds of events that you rent it out?
Can't you just make a separate contract for whoever?
It's getting, I want you to see where the complications come in here. I'll just spell it out right here. We've had some cases involving photographers, cake makers, florists, and sometimes they bring in the whole package. Like up here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, they've got a place called the Hitching Post. So they rent out their area, and they also provide as part of that place the catering and the man who will officiate over the wedding ceremony. So this is it's like a wedding chapel kind of a thing. Okay, now, here's the deal. Some of the folks who are doing florists and cakes and photographs and so forth, as well as some of the people who were offering these wedding services, say as part of their particular religious belief system, they are not into same-sex marriage. Now, granted, same-sex marriage has been legal as a result of a Supreme Court case, within the last 10 years or so. Okay? Are they in violation of local discriminatory ordinances, or do they have a right under their free exercise of religion to distinguish and say, no, we're not going to do those particular marriages? Do you understand where we're coming from? All right. What are your thoughts? Is it as simple as saying it's a private business open to the public? Let's make it, we'll do this one real simple. Because there was one case, I think it was in Indiana, it was kind of weird. It was a pizza place. I mean, do pizza places, can they discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation as far as serving food? No. Okay. What about, hiring? No, not really. Okay. But it was interesting because this case came up in Indiana, I think it was Indiana, that they also did catering for weddings, if you can imagine that. Okay. I mean, that's pretty cool. What do you want on your topping? Oh, I don't know, bride and a groom. Or I don't know, they were asked if they would cater to a same-sex marriage. And they were like, no, that's not our religious belief system and so forth. And so they said no. And then they were challenged. I can't remember if it was a boycott effort, which is, can people organize a boycott? Yeah, that's a whole private sort of thing there. What we're talking about, though, is can a government, in support of its own anti-discrimination laws, can they fine them? Because that's what they would do. Because they'll be basically saying, if you limit it, then we're going to fine you. And then they're saying, okay, you can't fine us. Okay, and that actually came up in the case of the Coeur d'Alene hitching post there. Go for it.
Okay, so you mentioned the
That's a health thing, yeah. So that one's.
But what if it a patient was brought by COPD which has chronic stuff? Could that be considered discrimination?
I think those are going to be, the health kinds of ones are interesting. I have a feeling that this probably, as we get out of the whole COVID thing, I think we're going to end up seeing some cases popping up here, there, and everywhere as different communities go at different paces as far as pulling their things back. But as far as here's one for you. Can a local government say that a pastor has to perform, can't discriminate with respect to any kind of marriage that they're performing? Do you understand that? Are there pastors who will conduct same-sex marriages? Check. Are there other people who can conduct same-sex marriages irrespective of religion? Yeah, so for example, there's judges. They do that because you can get a valid marriage and hire a judge. And can a judge say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this religion's marriage, or I'm not going to do a homosexual same-sex marriage, but I am going to do a traditional heterosexual? No, the judges can't do that. But can a pastor distinguish? Or is the government able to say, you need to follow the anti-discriminatory laws irrespective of what your religious beliefs are? You see where it's gotten a little problematic? And that's where these cases are popping up all over the place. This is the world that you guys live in right now. And I'm telling you, the battlefield is governments trying to prevent discrimination in the public field versus privately held religious points of view. Florists and photographers and cake makers, some of them are saying that that's very much part of their creative expression of their religious and personal views. Therefore, they shouldn't be told by the government to do this one or that one or a whole range of various different things. Do you understand that? For example, up in Coeur d'Alene, these folks that were running this business, they said if the government forced us to do same-sex marriages, they would shut down. They just wouldn't offer it. In fact, what they'll say is, if somebody wants a same-sex marriage, go to somebody else. But it's the same point. I mean, it's arguably, how far do you take this argument? Would you accept that argument, say, in the 1960s, if a restaurant said, I'm sorry, we're not going to serve African Americans. I'm sure there's other restaurants that you can go to that will serve African Americans. Is it like that or not?
There's no religious reason that people are turning away African Americans.
Some people would claim it, but yeah, they were just basically saying we just didn't want them there. Yeah. So I mean, it's how much rights do you subscribe to somebody for religion? Here's an easy one. Okay, if you have a Jewish baker and somebody comes in and says, I want a Hitler birthday cake. I think you used that one before. Okay, I mean, that'd be really weird, but maybe they're just trying to press the point. Are you going to discriminate against, neo-Nazi points of view or by forcing a Jewish baker to make a Hitler birthday cake? How many of you guys think that the Jewish baker should be forced to make the Hitler birthday cake because they're open to the public and they shouldn't be discriminated against based on those kinds of views? How many of you guys would leave it up to the Jewish baker as to what kind of cakes they were making? Okay, yeah. So make note of this. This is unresolved area, battlefield, constitutional, civil rights battlefield going on right now. There's not a lot of really clear views, and in some communities, it's tough if you want to kind of go against the majoritarian point of view. In other communities, it's no big deal. Yes?
Could a restaurant turn somebody away in a wheelchair because they don't have a ramp?
This is actually, let me come back to this. We're going to get to the Americans with Disabilities Act in the top of page 3, and that is going to be interesting. Usually the rules, on that one, it's not a constitutional question so much as it is federal law. The rules are fairly practical in federal law. If it's an old building, it might have been exempted. If it's a new building, are they going to have like handicap access? Heck yeah. Oh yeah. So that's usually where you find that distinction, because there's an expense involved. And so to upgrade and retrofit an old building might be very, very expensive, and the government might just say, never mind. But a new building, you got to get your permits and get those things lined up. Okay? Not an easy area for you. And the Supreme Court has been, I think, kind of reticent because it's still sort of sorting its way out. People don't necessarily like being told what to do. And you'll hear one of the arguments that comes up is, you can't make me do this. This is my religious beliefs. And religious beliefs are very highly protected. Yeah. Okay? This is an easy one. Let's see if we can figure this one out. This is sort of a ha, 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 ha. Is it possible for somebody who legitimately has an Aztec religious point of view for human sacrifice to be able to exercise their religion? Caden is going to crack this one. He's going to figure out a way that an Aztec worshiper is going to be able to conduct a human sacrifice. Go for it.
I just wanted to say, playing devil's advocate, I don't believe any of this.
Not devil's advocate, Aztec's advocate.
Aztec
Okay,
advocate?
Aztec's advocate, yeah.
I'm stuck in the Christian point of view.
Okay.
Okay. So, with video consent, I would say video and written consent.
Okay.
For permission, and only one.
Gabe, are you going to give video and written consent to, do you want to be the person here?
I would like to
Okay, so Caden is a Neo-Aztec worshiper, and would you give video written consent to?
I want him to sacrifice me. There's no one in this.
Okay, well let me listen, okay. Okay, here's the deal, okay? Which is weird. Let's just say, Gabe, alternative Gabe. Alternative Gabe is a Neo-Aztec worshiper, and we have a volunteer here. Okay, and so this guy is obviously willing to have written and video consent. In fact, he's just about to write it down. Okay? Okay, never mind. Can he do that? Can people just do that? Yes?
No, because you cannot consent to grievous bodily harm.
You cannot consent to grievous bodily harm. Sorry. Those laws are there. You cannot consent to grievous bodily harm of yourself. Right? Is that true? Is that true in Idaho? Is it legal to take your own life in Idaho? No. Is it legal to take somebody else's life even though they've given written and video consent? No. Wait a minute. Hold on. Shh. In Idaho, yes. Shh. Hold on.
What if he starts this sacrifice and then they kill themselves before they die?
Okay, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Nope, yep. Shh. Okay, oh. Shh. Pause. Everyone listen. Caden is starting to figure out a way out, sadly. Okay? Idaho, is assisted suicide legal in the state of Idaho? No. Oh, somebody's chiming in. Write this down. In Oregon, shh. In Oregon, lots of things are legal. In Oregon and other parts of the Europe, I would say, because like Switzerland, I think, like the Netherlands, yeah, sometimes the government actually sends letters to people going, here's some information about how you could, anyway, I don't want to get too far into it and so forth, but yeah. Yeah. So here we go. So what if, okay, okay, hold on. Yeah. So who qualifies to have a legal suicide in the state of, do you know?
Yeah, you have to be like really sick.
Yeah. So you have to meet a certain criteria. It can't just be somebody who's having a really bad day or week. And of course, here's the problem is somebody could be going, I hate everything. This is terrible. This is really bad. It's a condition. I need to be put through. And other people are like, help, help. Let's get some help, help. But depending on like where you are, I don't think Oregon is quite that loose, but other places might have a very broad thing. It's kind of like, oh yeah, they're in a really, really bad way. Check the box, bad way. So therefore they can have an assisted suicide. So do you see how this would work out then? If, Caden, he seems very cheery and so forth, and I'm not aware of any debilitating illnesses that are terminal. Oh my gosh, that's not good enough. No, Caden, we don't agree. Shh. So you're looking at this and you're like, so are you saying that if somebody qualifies for an assisted suicide in Oregon, they could volunteer to meet the long-held viewpoint of somebody who is an Aztec worshiper and allow for them to conduct the assisted suicide in the form of an Aztec, rip your heart out, offer it to the gods in your backyard pyramid ceremony? It's pretty messed up, and I sure hope that doesn't ever appear in the news, because arguably possible. Okay, final word from, not the final word, but the final word on this topic from Caden. Okay, shh.
Because things were going bad, they started sacrificing people and they didn't do it very often, so they should have a reason.
Oh no, they do it like, yeah, I mean they do it seasonally and they need more than one. Oh, announcement, yes?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Just want to let you all know that the Snack Shack is starting back up tomorrow. So if you have a couple bucks, bring them. It's going to be pretty cool. We got a bunch of candy. If your first period teacher showed you the announcement.
Did you guys get the announcements first period? Yeah, they did. Okay.
Well,
all right.
then you know.
There you go.
Okay? So you ever had that feeling where you're hungry, lunchtime, you look in your backpack, but uh-oh, there's no lunch. So what do you do instead? You look for your wallet and go to the Snack Shack, all right? Hope to see you all there tomorrow. Have a great, yes, Mom. There are no Jolly Ranchers, there are high cheese.
What
Okay.
about like Micah?
What about like Aztec hot candies made of like human hearts?
Yes, we might expand the
Okay.
inventory.
All right, keep those requests coming
There
in.
is M&Ms, both
Okay.
peanut and regular.
All right, thank you very much, sir. All right. Au revoir. All right, here we go.
So, okay, what if somebody did like the outside ritual, but they like sold the body or like parts of the body illegally? Then the police had to like get the.
You just said it was illegal.
I know. It's like the exclusionary rule. So like, could they use this against them in court?
Hi. Yes, okay.
How topical.
Oh,
My time for his Aztec sacrifice.
okay, just in time. Caden is leaving. He's going up the steps of the pyramid. Yes. Okay, all right. Here we go. Prison rights. Write this down. Prison rights. Okay? Rights. Rights. It says right up there. Rights. Okay? Shh. If you are a prisoner in jail or in prison, you have all kinds of rights that have been taken away as a consequence of committing various different violations of the law. So, here's the deal. You can write this down because this is definitely going to happen. Prisoners having rights limited and privileges limited and all kinds of freedom limited are going to advocate, and they've got a lot of time. Some of them have a lot of time to advocate for their various different rights because it kind of sucks to be in prison, okay? So, do they have rights? Yes. Do they have First Amendment free exercise of religious rights? Yes. How far do they go? Well, I'll tell you what. There's a lot of cases in the court system that are measuring the breadth of how much they can have. So, for example, here's one. Check this one. It's pretty easy. Can they have a religious text in their person, even though other paper properties, products, and so forth might be limited? Can they have a Bible or something like that, or Quran? Yes, that's going to be a basic one. Can they get together for religious worship? Yes, you can put that down. Okay? Now, can they get together like every hour? No, it's not going to be an unreasonable one. And so what you have here is a time set aside for religious practice, worship. Can they sing songs? Yes. Okay, so you're going to have some of those kinds of things. Can they leave the prison in order to go proselytize? Ixnay on that. Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's kind of like, oh, I'm going on my mission, and yeah, with a prisoner. Okay. Yes. Question. If they're already qualified to do work release, could they do it in conjunction with the church and so forth? I don't see why not. Yeah. Okay? And in fact, actually, prisons have found that where they have people who are very tapped into religious practices and so forth, generally those make better prisoners and run less afoul with the rules and so forth. So those kinds of relationships are actually sought after by the prison, but they're not going to like completely get rid of all the rules and regulations. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's go into an establishment question, which is also a little bit of a free exercise question. This is the state of Idaho and the Idaho Senate. And there's a man starting the session with a Hindu prayer. Does anybody want to attempt an analysis on how that would work or not work with respect to the Lemon test? Want to give it a shot? Go for it. Idaho Legislature, okay, so these are people elected by Idaho voters, and they gather in the State House, and they start off the day with a prayer. You don't have to be there for that prayer at the beginning of the day, but you can. Every day it's going to be someone. Now here's a little bit of information that's actually quite relevant. They will rotate the people who are doing the prayer. So here is the gentleman is doing it on that particular day, but I dare say he might not do it again in the session, or if he does, maybe once or at most twice. Do you understand that? That's actually a key point, rotating people in and out for that initial religious prayer. Anybody want to give it a shot? As far as analysis, is this going to be okay or not okay? Is it going to be okay? How? Okay, so it's not advancing one particular religion. Is it advancing religion? Okay, all right. Okay, so we got that in there. I mean, it's pretty much for the people who are in the legislature themselves. Many of them are believers in a variety of different religious points of view. Okay. It's interesting just looking at this picture. Some of them, like they have their heads bowed and so forth. Some of them are looking on. It's hard to read exactly what's going on in the minds of everyone. Do you anticipate that there are a lot of Hindus in the Idaho legislature? I don't think so. In fact, I would be surprised if there were even one or two, because Hinduism is not a widely held religious belief system in the state of Idaho. Okay? How is this not a violation of the Shemp situation? Remember the public school thing? How is this gathering different? What's the difference between these old guys and you old guys? You're impressionable. You're still under the care and persuasion of your parents. You understand that? So yeah, and so that's going to be one of the key distinctions there. You're not going to be able to have like, oh, let's just rotate and have different religious people come in and start the prayer at the beginning of a school day. It's not going to happen. But here, it'll happen. Yes? Yes. Okay? All right. Let's go to the school settings. All right? Write this down. School settings. These, back to the school settings. We started out with Shemp as a very important case where prayer in school is not going to be allowed. And I forgot to point out to you guys here. In fact, this was a big omission on my part. We know in the case of Shemp, can the school have a prayer at the beginning of the day? No. Can the school, now here we go, make sure you get this one. Can the school appoint a different student to do a prayer at the beginning of school each day to spread it out? No. Supreme Court has said, no. You can write that down. Can't spread it out. Okay? In fact, you might be surprised at how the next step here. So, because it's like the school is directing this. Okay? All right, how about this one? Some schools were doing this. After the Shemp case came out, they're like, well, we still want to do something prayer at the beginning of the school, and if we can't have the students come up with the prayers and the school can't come up with the prayers, how about this one? Can the school say, all right, we're going to have a minute of silence, and during that minute of silence, you pray quietly? Now it's not allowed, but why not? Because they gave a specific reason. Very good. You can write that down. The students are directed to pray. Okay, so there is an implication there. So the government is saying, the public school is saying, it is for you to pray. What if they said, okay, we're going to have a minute of silence. Okay, and just left it at that. Does that meet the Lemon test? What is the purpose? Anna, does silence have a secular purpose? Secular is non-religious. We have to make sure we know what secular is, otherwise you're like, what are you talking about, Mr. Hanson? Okay, all right? So, I mean, it's like, is track secular? Is shouting secular? Is volleyball secular? Okay? Is a moment of silence secular? Yes. Yes. And if you're not directing them to do something in particular, then that's going to be okay. So that's pretty much where things are at right now. Oh my gosh, you guys are confusing me. How about this situation? All right, you ready? Write this down. Students on an athletic team in a public school setting. Can the coach lead a prayer with the players? I know some of you guys are like, well, I think if it happens, therefore it must be. Is the coach a public school employee? Yes. Therefore, can the coach lead a prayer? That would be a violation of the Lemon test. I know, you're like, I know, it's kind of like, and this is a fascinating thing because sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, we've got all these different rules this way, and some people are completely ignorant to it and do whatever they're going to do anyway. Other people are like, they're so afraid of running afoul, and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to teach history, but I can't talk about anything to do with religion and history. Is that realistic? That's ridiculous. Oh my gosh, I can't talk about like Jewish belief systems because that's Jewish belief systems. We'll just have to skip the Holocaust. No. We're going to do Martin Luther, and I don't know, should we talk about the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism? Yeah, you have to. Okay? So, but it is an interesting point because as you go through, I love that Max is like, well, we did it anyway. How about this one? Max, I'm going to ask you this question. Do the students have a First Amendment right to express their religious points of view before a game? Yes. Can the students, on their own volition, lead a prayer? Clearly, yes. Okay? Does that make sense? Because is that the government establishing and coordinating and encouraging a particular religious practice, i.e. a prayer? No. Okay? So that one would work. Okay? Here's the thing. If the players say, hey, coach, can we do a prayer right now? What's the coach going to say? Can the coach say, no, there will be no praying among you? No, because that would be an interference of their religious free exercise rights. Yeah. Yes. Okay? Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of a push and pull and so forth. The practical reality is, if you want to have a prayer before a game, can you do that? Yeah. It just has to be student initiated. Okay? Yeah, so it's a little bit different. It's not quite the classroom setting and so forth, but it's, kind of along those lines. How about, oh my gosh, this was interesting. This is actually probably dated. Do you guys know about Tebowing? Tim Tebow, he used to play football for the Denver Broncos. He was actually pretty remarkable. He did pretty well. He's a very